They called him the Lion of New York. Gabriel Blackwood was not just a name in financial newspapers, he was a force of nature who moved mountains, literally. Heir to a mining empire that stretched from Montana to Georgia, at 35 years old, Gabriel commanded Blackwood Mining with iron fists and a coldness that made even the most experienced politicians tremble when his name was mentioned in Washington offices. In the penthouse of the corporate building on Wall Street, while the city pulsed, 30 floors below, Gabriel adjusted the cuffs of his Italian shirt and watched New York disappear into the horizon. The sun was beginning to hide between the skyscrapers, painting the sky with an intense orange that contrasted with the gray of the concrete. It was September, and the air still carried the chill of a New York winter mixed with the promise of an approaching summer. His secretary, Martha, a 50-year-old woman who had known him since he was just the rebellious son of patriarch Augustus Blackwood, entered the office without knocking. She was the only person in the world who had that freedom. "Your mother called 3 times, she said, placing a folder on the solid mahogany desk. "She said it's about the property in Newport." Gabriel didn't raise his eyes from the financial reports he was analyzing. Numbers didn't lie, unlike people. The numbers showed that despite the recession that still haunted the country, Blackwood Mining had grown 15% in the last quarter. But they also showed something that left him uneasy: suspicious movements in some of the offshore accounts, transactions that he had not authorized. "Tell Mrs. Helen that I'm busy," he murmured, without diverting his attention from the spreadsheet. "She said it's not a request, it's an order." Martha crossed her arms, assuming the maternal posture she adopted when she needed to confront him. "And you know how she gets when she's contradicted." Gabriel finally raised his eyes. Helen Blackwood was not a woman who could be contradicted with impunity. Widowed for 5 years, she had taken social and political control of the family with a determination that rivaled her son's own business strength. It was she who maintained connections with Washington, who attended the right dinners, who knew exactly which senator needed a favor and which cabinet member had skeletons in the closet. "What does she want in Newport?" A restorer was hired to evaluate the art pieces in the colonial house. "It seems there are some antiques that may be worth a fortune, but they need authentication." Martha consulted her notes. Emma Taylor, graduated from Columbia, specialized in colonial American art and pieces from the Revolutionary period. "Your mother insists that you personally supervise." Gabriel frowned. Helen had never been interested in the family's antiques. The property in Newport, a mansion built in the 19th century by a cotton baron who had married a Blackwood, had been closed for years after the patriarch's death. Why did she want to mess with this now? "There's something else," continued Martha, hesitantly. "Your mother mentioned the Coleman family name several times, and you know what that means." Gabriel closed his eyes for a moment. The Colemans, the family of the current Attorney General, Frank Coleman, who had been investigating irregularities in the mining sector for months. The same family whose daughter, Isabella Coleman, had been his classmate at Harvard Law School and who, according to the whispers of New York salons, would be an ideal wife for a man in his position. "Mother is plotting," he said, more to himself than to Martha. "When isn't she?" she retorted with a half-smile. "Do you want me to cancel tomorrow's meeting with the Japanese?" Gabriel got up, walking to the panoramic window. Down below, Wall Street traffic bubbled like blood in the city's veins. New York never slept, neither did he. It had been months since he'd had a full night's sleep, always waking up with the feeling that something was escaping his control. "No, reschedule for Monday." He returned to the desk and picked up the Porsche keys. "I'm going to Newport today." 2 hours later, Gabriel was driving on the highway that snaked to the coastal city, while the sun finally disappeared completely, leaving only the lights of the poles and other cars as company. The coastal air was different, cleaner, carrying the perfume of trees and the humidity of the approaching night. It was a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of New York, where each breath seemed to carry the weight of business and family expectations. The Blackwood property was in a noble area of Newport, hidden among century-old trees and protected by high walls that looked more like fortresses. When Gabriel passed through the electronic gate, The garden lanterns automatically lit up, revealing an avenue of imperial palms that led to the main mansion. The house was a masterpiece of 19th century architecture, with its wrought iron verandas, tall windows with noble wood shutters, and a garden that seemed to come out of a romantic dream. Gabriel had played there as a child, running through the silent corridors and hiding in the closed rooms that kept furniture covered by white sheets like sleeping ghosts. When he parked the car in the circular entrance, he noticed a white Volkswagen Jetta parked next to the main staircase. Simple, without ostentation. Completely out of standard for the vehicles that usually frequented the family properties. Gabriel climbed the marble steps, the house keys heavy in his hands. The main door, a solid piece of carved mahogany, opened with a soft creak that echoed through the entrance hall. The lights were on and he could hear the muffled sound of footsteps on the upper floor. "Hello?" he called, his voice echoing through the high ceilings decorated with frescoes from the colonial period. The steps stopped. For a moment, there was only the silence of the old house, broken by the tick-tock of the pendulum clock in the hallway. Then a female voice answered from the top of the main staircase. "Sorry, I wasn't expecting anyone. I'm Emma Taylor, the restorer." Gabriel raised his eyes and felt something strange happen in his chest. At the top of the curved staircase, a woman was slowly descending, one hand sliding down the polished wooden banister. She wore a simple navy blue cotton dress, which contrasted with her light brown skin, and had her brown hair tied in a low bun with some rebellious strands framing her face. But it was her eyes that held him. Large brown, with an intensity that seemed to see through him, as if she were capable of reading every thought he tried to hide. There was a serenity about her that completely contrasted with the world he was used to, a world of urgency, pressure, and social masks that never left the face. "Gabriel Blackwood," he said, extending his hand when she reached the last step. "Sorry for not warning that I was coming." Her hand was small, soft, but the grip was firm. She studied him for a moment, and Gabriel had the strange sensation of being evaluated, not for his wealth or social position, but for something much deeper. "Your mother said you might show up," replied Emma, releasing his hand. "I was in the Baron's room cataloguing the pieces. There are some impressive things here. What did you find?" Emma guided him through the main hall, passing ancestral portraits that observed with dead eyes from their golden frames. The house smelled of history, polished wood, and a soft jasmine perfume that seemed to come from nowhere. Mainly period furniture, some porcelains from the Orient that must have arrived in America in the second half of the 19th century, she explained, as they climbed the staircase. "But there's one piece that intrigued me, a desk that seems to have secret compartments." Gabriel followed her, observing how she moved with a natural grace, unhurried, without the anxiety that characterized most people in his presence. When they passed the full-length mirror in the second-floor corridor, he saw his own reflection. Tall, broad shoulders in the dark suit, black hair combed back, green eyes that his mother always said he had inherited from his Scottish great-grandfather. Next. To Emma, he seemed to belong to a completely different world, and perhaps he did indeed. The Baron's room was at the end of the corridor, a spacious suite with windows that faced the back garden. The soft light from the lamps created dancing shadows on the walls, lined with imported wallpaper, and the air carried an old perfume of wood and thyme. Emma had transformed the space into a kind of improvised laboratory. There were magnifying glasses, delicate brushes, small flasks with chemical solutions, and open notebooks with notes in an elegant and precise calligraphy. On the canopy bed, several pieces were carefully organized and catalogued. "It's fascinating how each piece tells a story," she said, picking up a small music box in the shape of a bird. "This one, for example, has a French inscription on the base. Pour ma bien-aimée Sophie avec tout mon amour. For my beloved Sophie, with all my love." Gabriel approached, observing how she handled the piece with reverent care. Her hands were delicate, but there was strength in them, a certainty that came from years of meticulous work. "Sophie was the Baron's wife," he said. "She died very young of tuberculosis. He never married again." Emma raised her eyes to him, surprised. "You know the family history?" "Some stories." Gabriel sat in the armchair next to the desk she had mentioned. My grandfather used to tell me about the ancestors when I was a child. He said it was important to know where we came from to know where we're going. Wise words. Emma placed the music box back in its place and approached the desk. Do you want to see what I discovered? Gabriel stood up, getting close enough to smell her soft perfume, something floral and discreet that contrasted with the intense perfumes of the women who frequented his social circle. Emma pressed a small protrusion on the side of the main drawer, and a section of the wood opened, revealing a hidden compartment. Amazing, murmured Gabriel. It's been here for more than a century and no one in the family knew. It was empty when I found it, said Emma, but there was something in her voice that made him pay attention, or almost empty. She took a small golden key from the secret compartment. I found this. It must open something important, perhaps a chest or a safe. Gabriel took the key, feeling its weight in his hands. It was delicately crafted, with engraved symbols that he couldn't identify. On the handle, there was an inscription almost erased by time. Can you read it? He asked. Emma leaned in closer, so close that he could feel her warm breath on his face. It seems to be. Guardians of. The rest is too faded. Something cold ran down Gabriel's spine. Guardians. His mother had mentioned that word a few times over the years, always in whispered conversations on the phone, always when she thought he wasn't listening. Mr. Blackwood, is everything all right? Gabriel realized he was holding the key too tightly. His knuckles whitened. Sorry. It's just that this word, guardians, sounds familiar to me. Emma studied him with those intense eyes. Familiar how? Before he could answer, the electric light flickered and went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. Gabriel heard Emma give a small gasp of surprise and instinctively reached out, finding her arm in the dark. Power outage, he said. Happens a lot here by the coast. I have a flashlight, murmured Emma, but she didn't move away from his touch. Gabriel could hear her breathing in the dark, could feel the heat of her skin under his fingers. There was something in the darkness that made everything more intense, more real. Her perfume, the sound of her breathing, the softness of her skin. Emma, he said, not knowing why he had pronounced her name. Yes. Her voice was lower, softer. Gabriel felt a magnetic attraction, something he couldn't explain or control. Slowly, he slid his hand up her arm until he found her face in the dark, his fingers tracing the delicate line of her jaw. I shouldn't be here, he whispered. Why not? Her question carried an innocence that completely disarmed him. Because he was Gabriel Blackwood, because he had responsibilities, because his mother was plotting a marriage that would save the family business, because a woman like Emma deserved someone better than him. But in the darkness of that centuries-old room, surrounded by stories of love and tragedy, none of that seemed to matter. Gabriel leaned his face, feeling her breath quicken. When their lips met, it was as if the whole world had stopped. The kiss started soft, hesitant but quickly deepened, carrying an urgency that neither of them could explain. Emma responded to the kiss with a passion that contrasted with her apparent shyness, her hands rising to his chest, her fingers tangling in the fabric of his shirt. Gabriel pulled her closer, one hand on her waist, the other still caressing her face. When they finally separated, both were breathing heavily. The light came back at that moment, flooding the room with a sudden brightness that made them blink, as if they were waking from a dream. Gabriel saw his own reflection in her eyes, disheveled, with lips still swollen from the kiss, his tie crooked. He looked like a completely different man from the one who had entered the house an hour before. Began Emma, but he gently placed a finger on her lips. Don't say anything, he murmured. Please. Because if she said something, if they put words to what had happened, they would have to face reality. And Gabriel wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Emma nodded, her eyes still fixed on his. There was an understanding there, as if she instinctively knew that this moment existed in a bubble of time separate from the rest of the world. Gabriel stepped away, trying to regain his composure. He straightened his tie, ran his hands through his hair, became again the controlled executive that everyone knew. But inside, Something had changed irreversibly. "I should go," he said, picking up the car keys from the dresser. "It's late." "Of course," replied Emma, her voice almost a whisper. Gabriel walked to the door but stopped at the threshold. "Emma?" "Yes?" "Tomorrow, will you continue the work here?" "I will. There's still a lot to catalogue." "Then maybe I'll come by to see how the progress is going." She smiled, and the smile was like the sun rising after a long winter night. "I would like that." Gabriel descended the staircase in silence, her words echoing in his mind. At the front door he stopped, closed his eyes and tried to understand what had happened. In 35 years of life he had kissed many women, had relationships, had even thought about getting married a few times. But he had never felt that feeling of belonging, as if he had finally found a place where his soul could rest. The night air was cold against his heated skin. Gabriel got into the Porsche but didn't start the engine immediately. He looked at the illuminated windows on the second floor, where he could see Emma's silhouette moving between the art pieces. His phone vibrated. A message from his mother. "I hope you liked the restorer. We need to talk tomorrow. There are news about the Colemans." Gabriel closed his eyes, feeling the weight of reality gradually return. Isabella Coleman. The marriage everyone expected. The business that depended on strategic political alliances. The world to which he belonged and to which Emma could never belong. But when he opened his eyes and saw the light still on in the room where she worked, Gabriel knew he had crossed a line from which there would be no return. No matter what his mother had planned, no matter the expectations or the consequences, for the first time in his life, he had found something that was worth more than the family empire. He started the engine and drove away on the winding road, but a part of him stayed in that century-old house, in that room full of love stories, with a woman who had awakened something he thought was dead inside him. The September night was clear, starry, full of possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, Gabriel Blackwood smiled as he drove, not knowing that within 24 hours his life would be turned upside down. The Lion of New York, Part 2. Gabriel couldn't sleep. He spent the entire night lying on the king-size bed of his apartment in Tribeca, staring at the ceiling while his mind replayed every second of that kiss. The taste of Emma's lips was still in his mouth, her perfume still impregnated on his skin, the sensation of her small, warm hands against his chest still burning like a brand. At 5 in the morning, he gave up trying to sleep. He put on shorts and a t-shirt and went to the private gym in the building, trying to discharge on the treadmill and weights the tension that ran through his veins like electricity. But each drop of sweat that ran down his face only intensified the memory of the heat he had felt when she approached him in the dark. At 7, he was back in the apartment, taking a cold shower that did little to calm his nerves. While shaving, he avoided looking directly at his own reflection in the mirror. There was something different in his eyes, an intensity that wasn't there before, as if Emma had awakened a part of him that had been sleeping for years. His phone rang while he was choosing a tie. Helen Blackwood never called before 8 in the morning unless something very important was happening. "Good morning, Mother. Gabriel, I need you to come to my house before going to the office." Helen's voice sounded tense, controlled, but he knew her well enough to perceive the disguised urgency. "It's about the situation with the Justice Department." Gabriel closed his eyes. Reality was coming back like a punch in the stomach. "What happened?" "Frank Coleman called me last night. The investigations into irregularities in the mining sector have been intensified. They have search and seizure warrants ready to be executed in several companies in the sector." Helen made a significant pause. "Including ours." Gabriel sat heavily on the edge of the bed. The suspicious transactions he had noticed in the financial reports, the movements he couldn't explain. His mother knew something. "Mother, what did you do? What was necessary to keep this family at the top?" Her voice was cold now, carrying the authority she had exercised for decades. "But this can be resolved. Frank is willing to guide the..." Investigation in another direction, as long as certain commitments are honored. Isabella, said Gabriel, more a statement than a question. The wedding would be announced next week, the ceremony in a month, an alliance between traditional families based on mutual respect and common interests. Helen was using the tone she used in business meetings, as if she were closing one more contract. Isabella is an educated young woman graduated from Princeton. With a master's degree in international relations, she would be a perfect wife for a man in your position. Gabriel ran his hand through his hair, feeling the weight of 3 generations of family expectations crushing his shoulders. And if I refuse? The silence on the other end of the line was more eloquent than any threat. You won't refuse, said Helen finally, because you know what's at stake. It's not just our business, Gabriel. It's the jobs of tens of thousands of people. It's entire communities that depend on our mines. It's the contracts with the government, the international investments, everything your father and grandfather built. Gabriel got up and walked to the window, looking at the city that was waking up under the morning October sun. Down there, traffic was already starting to form, people rushing to their jobs, living their simple and honest lives. How many of them really depended on the decisions he made? Mother, I need time to think. We don't have time, Helen sighed, and for the first time in years he heard fatigue in her voice. Gabriel, you are my son, but you are also the heir to a dynasty. Sometimes what we want personally has to take a back seat. After hanging up, Gabriel stood at the window for long minutes, watching the city bustle. His reflection in the glass showed a divided man, half illuminated by the rising sun, half hidden in the shadows of the apartment. He picked up the car keys. An hour and a half later, Gabriel was parking again in front of the Newport mansion. This time there was one more car at the entrance, a black Mercedes with official plates. His mother had arrived before him. Helen Blackwood was in the main hall, elegant as always, in a navy blue Chanel suit, talking with Emma about a Chinese porcelain that shone in the restorer's hands. The 2 women couldn't be more different, Helen imposing and controlled, each gesture calculated. Emma, natural and genuine, her movements fluid like water. Gabriel, good that you came, said Helen, without taking her eyes off the porcelain. Miss Taylor was showing me her discoveries. Impressive work. Gabriel observed Emma blush slightly under the compliment, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment before diverting. She wore a simple white blouse and a brown midi skirt, her hair, loose today, framing her face in a way that made Gabriel's heart race. Miss Taylor has a lot of talent, he said, trying to keep his voice neutral. Yes, and excellent training. Helen finally turned to her son, her blue eyes studying his face with the precision of a scanner. Columbia specializations in Europe, an exemplary professional. There was something in his mother's tone that Gabriel couldn't decipher. As if she were evaluating Emma for something more than just her work as a restorer. Mr. Blackwood, said Emma, addressing Gabriel, would you like to see what I discovered last night, after you left? Gabriel nodded, following her to the Baron's study, Helen walking behind them in silence. The room was organized differently today, with several pieces arranged on the central table and detailed photographs spread next to each item. I found 3 more secret compartments, explained Emma, excited, and in one of them, she took a small box of faded red velvet. This. Gabriel approached as she opened the box, revealing an ancient ring. It wasn't a common jewel. It was a piece of refined craftsmanship, with a symbol engraved in the center that he recognized immediately. The same symbol as the key, he murmured. Exactly. Emma carefully picked up the ring. And I discovered something else. She showed an enlarged photograph of the symbol. It was a stylized eye, surrounded by symbols that looked like runes or ancient writing. In the center of the eye, a small ruby shone like a drop of blood. I researched during the night, said Emma. This symbol appears in several European secret societies of the 18th and 19th centuries. Groups of influential people who gathered to, well, no one knows exactly what for. But they all had one thing in common. They protected something. Gabriel felt a chill down his spine. Protected what? Secrets. documents, sometimes people. Emma looked at Helen, who remained strangely silent. Societies like these were common among the American elite of the Revolutionary period, a way to maintain power and influence even with political changes. Helen approached, extending her hand to examine the ring. "May I?" Emma hesitated for a moment, but handed over the piece. Helen held the ring against the light, studying every detail with a familiarity that made Gabriel frown. "The Guardians of the Crimson Eye," said Helen finally, her voice low and loaded with meaning. Gabriel and Emma looked at each other. "You know this society?" asked Emma. Helen returned the ring, but her eyes remained fixed on the symbol. "I knew someone who wore a ring like this, a long time ago." "Who?" The question escaped Gabriel's lips before he could contain it. Helen studied him for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "Your Aunt Elizabeth, your father's sister." Gabriel felt the world spin. Elizabeth Blackwood had disappeared when he was only 5 years old. The family never talked about her, as if she had been erased from family history. Aunt Elizabeth wore a ring like this? Elizabeth was investigating the family history. She had found documents, old records that suggested irregularities in how the Blackwood fortune had been built. Helen walked to the window, observing the garden outside. She believed that our family was involved with this secret society, that there were secrets being protected for generations. Emma was holding the ring box tightly, her knuckles whitened. What happened to her? She disappeared. Helen turned, her face a mask of control. One night she simply didn't come home. The police said she had run away, perhaps abroad. But I always knew there was something more. Gabriel felt as if the floor was moving beneath his feet. "Why did you never tell me this?" "Because I didn't want you to follow the same path as her." Helen approached her son, placing one of her hands on his arm. Elizabeth was obsessed with the past, Gabriel. She forgot that the present also needs care. "Like now," said Gabriel, understanding the implicit message. "Like now," confirmed Helen. "We have responsibilities in the present, commitments that cannot be ignored." Emma observed the interaction between mother and son with growing discomfort. There were tensions there that she couldn't completely understand, underground currents of power and expectation that made the air in the room seem dense. "I should leave you to talk," she said, beginning to move away. "No," said Gabriel quickly. "You discovered these clues. You have the right to know the truth." Helen studied her son with sharp eyes. "Gabriel, no, mother. Enough secrets." Gabriel turned to Emma. "Want to know the truth? My family is being investigated for financial irregularities. My mother wants me to marry the daughter of the Attorney General to make these investigations disappear. And now we discover that there may be a secret society involved in all this for generations." Emma took a step back, her face paling. I shouldn't be hearing this." "Why not?" Gabriel approached her, ignoring his mother's warning look. "You're already involved. You found the clues, made the connections, and—" He stopped, the words dying in his throat. How could he say that she was involved because he couldn't stop thinking about her? Because a single kiss had changed everything. Helen observed the two with the astuteness of a woman who had spent decades reading people and situations. "Gabriel, Miss Taylor is a professional. She has her own life, her own plans. We should not involve her in our family matters." The way Helen pronounced family matters sounded like a subtle threat, and Gabriel saw Emma retreat even more. "Maybe I should go," said Emma softly. "I can finish the report at home, send it by email." "No." Gabriel extended his hand, lightly touching her arm. "Please, stay." The touch was a mistake. The moment his fingers met her skin, the same electricity from the night before returned. So intense it was almost visible. Helen missed nothing. "Gabriel," she said, her voice laden with warning. But he wasn't listening to his mother. He was looking into Emma's eyes, seeing fear, confusion, and something else, the same desire that burned inside him. "Emma," he said softly, "don't let this frighten you." "I'm not from your world," she murmured. "I don't understand these complications, these power games." "I don't want you to understand either." Gabriel moved closer, his hands now holding her arms gently. I want you to continue being exactly who you are. Helen cleared her throat loudly. Gabriel, I think we should go back to New York. You have meetings this afternoon and I need to make some important calls. Gabriel didn't move. Meetings can be cancelled. Not all of them. Helen approached, her tone now making it clear that it wasn't a suggestion. Isabella Coleman is waiting for your call. You have a dinner scheduled tomorrow night. The mention of Isabella's name was like a bucket of cold water. Emma moved away from Gabriel immediately, her face red with embarrassment. I'm sorry, she said, avoiding looking at him. I didn't know that you were engaged. I'm not, said Gabriel firmly. Not yet, corrected Helen. But you will be. The silence that followed was loaded with tension. Gabriel looked at his mother with barely contained anger, Helen maintained, her impassive expression, and Emma seemed to want to disappear. I'll get my things, said Emma finally. I can finish the work at home. She left the room quickly, leaving mother and son alone. Gabriel waited to hear her footsteps move away before turning to Helen. How can you be so cruel? Cruel? Helen arched an eyebrow. I'm being realistic. This young woman is lovely, Gabriel, but she can't help us with the problems we face. Isabella can. I don't love Isabella. Love is a luxury that men in our position cannot always afford. Helen approached, her voice softening slightly. Your father didn't love me either when we got married. Love came later, with time, with mutual respect. And if it doesn't come, Helen sighed, then you learn to live without it, as I learned. Her words hit Gabriel like stabs. His mother had given up love for family, for business, for responsibilities, and now she expected him to do the same. Mother, Gabriel. Emma's voice echoed from the corridor, interrupting him. There was something urgent in her tone that made them both run out of the room. They found her in the main hall, standing in front of a portrait that Gabriel had seen 1,000 times without ever paying attention. It was the portrait of a young woman, painted in the 19th century style, with a blue dress and a delicate necklace on her neck. Who is she? Asked Emma, her voice trembling. Gabriel approached the portrait, reading the small golden plaque on the frame. Sophie Laurent Blackwood, the Baron's wife. No, said Emma, pointing to the necklace the woman wore in the portrait. Look at the necklace. Gabriel looked closer and felt his blood freeze in his veins. The pendant of the necklace was identical to the symbol they had found on the ring, the crimson eye surrounded by ancient runes. Sophie was a guardian, murmured Helen. Not just that. Emma turned to them, her face pale as paper. Look at her face. Look closely. Gabriel studied the portrait more carefully. The shape of the face, the large and expressive eyes, the delicate line of the jaw. My God, he whispered. Sophie Laurent Blackwood could be Emma's twin sister. Helen approached the portrait, studying each detail. The resemblance is impressive. It's not just resemblance, said Emma, her voice almost a whisper. My mother always said that our family came to America in the 19th century, that we had French ancestors. Laurent, murmured Gabriel. Sophie Laurent. Emma nodded slowly. My full name is Emma Laurent Taylor. My mother was a Laurent. The silence that followed was loaded with implications that none of the three wanted to face. If Emma was a descendant of Sophie, if Sophie was a guardian of the Crimson Eye, then Emma wasn't there by chance. Where is your mother now? Asked Helen, her voice carefully controlled. She disappeared when I was 15, said Emma, tears beginning to form in her eyes. One night, she simply didn't come home. The police said she had run away, but I always knew there was something more. Gabriel felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. 2 women from the family, 2 different generations, both investigating the guardians. Both disappeared. Emma, he said, approaching her, you need to leave, now. Why? Because if my Aunt Elizabeth disappeared for investigating the guardians, if your mother disappeared for the same reason, Gabriel swallowed hard. You could be next. Helen observed the interaction with an expression that Gabriel couldn't decipher. Perhaps, she said slowly, It's time we discovered the truth once and for all. Mother. No. Gabriel. This secret. Society clearly has a connection with our family that goes beyond what we imagined. If Miss Taylor is a descendant of Sophie, if she has the same abilities that her mother apparently had. Helen turned to Emma. Dear, did your mother leave? Anything for you? Documents, letters, something that could explain her disappearance? Emma hesitated, then nodded slowly. A box. It was hidden in the attic of my house. I never had the courage to fully open it, but there were old photographs, documents in French that I couldn't translate. Where is this box now? At home. In Newport. I've been living here for 2 years. Gabriel turned to his mother. Mother, this is dangerous. If the guardians still exist, if they were responsible for the disappearances, then it's even more important to find out who they are, interrupted Helen. Miss Taylor, would you be willing to show us what your mother left? Emma looked between Gabriel and Helen, clearly divided between curiosity and fear. I don't know if it's a good idea. Gabriel approached her, taking her hands in his. Emma, I promise I won't let anything happen to you. But my mother is right. We need to discover the truth. She studied him for a long moment, looking for something in his eyes. Why is this so important to you? The question hung in the air. Between them, Gabriel could say it was for the mystery, for the family history, for the need to protect her. But the truth was simpler and more complicated at the same time. Because I can't lose you too, he said finally. The words came out, before he could contain them, carrying a vulnerability that surprised him. Helen arched an eyebrow but said nothing. Emma blushed, her eyes filling with tears. Gabriel, I know we barely know each other. I know all this is crazy. But last night when I kissed you, he paused, swallowing hard. It was the first time in my life that I felt I was in the right place. Helen sighed deeply. Gabriel, you know this can't. Yes, it can, he interrupted, without taking his eyes off Emma. It can if I want it to, and I want it to. Emma looked at him for a long moment, then turned to Helen. Mrs. Blackwood, with all due respect, your son is an adult man. He can make his own choices. Helen studied Emma with new attention, as if seeing her for the first time. Yes, she said slowly. I suppose he can. Gabriel felt a wave of hope. So will you help me discover the truth? Emma nodded slowly. Let's go to my house. My mother's box is there. As they left the mansion, Gabriel couldn't help thinking that he was crossing another line. With each step he took beside Emma, with each moment he spent getting to know her better, the idea of an arranged marriage with Isabella Coleman became more impossible. He looked at the October sky, still clear and blue despite the dark clouds forming on the horizon. A storm was coming. He could feel it in the changing wind, in the electricity of the air. And deep in his heart, he knew that when the storm passed, nothing would ever be the same again. The Lion of New York, Part 3. Emma's house was on a quiet street in the historic center of Newport, a small construction from the early 20th century that had been carefully restored. Gabriel parked the Porsche next to her Volkswagen, noting how the simplicity of the place contrasted with the world of luxury he was accustomed to. But there was something welcoming there, a sense of home that his mansions never had. Helen got out of the Mercedes that had arrived right behind, studying the property with critical eyes but without contempt. Charming, she said, and Gabriel realized she meant it. Emma led them through the small porch to the front door, her hands trembling slightly as she searched for the keys in her purse. Sorry for the mess, she murmured. I wasn't expecting visitors. You don't need to apologize for anything, said Gabriel softly, touching her arm gently. The interior of the house was exactly what Gabriel had imagined Emma's home would be. White walls decorated with delicate watercolors, antique furniture restored with care, shelves filled with books on art and history. There were plants in every corner, filling the air with the scent of life and growth. The box is in my room, said Emma, hesitating at the base of the narrow staircase. never showed its contents to anyone. "Are you sure you want to do this?" asked Gabriel. "We can wait if you prefer." Emma looked him in the eyes, and he saw determination mixed with fear. "No, I've waited too long. My mother disappeared 12 years ago, and I never had the courage to look for answers. Maybe it's time." They climbed the stairs in silence, Gabriel observing how each step creaked softly under his feet, how the photographs on the walls showed Emma at different ages, always with the same brown-haired woman with a gentle smile who must have been her mother. Emma's room was small but cozy, with a white iron bed, an antique desk by the window, and a wooden wardrobe that seemed to be more than a century old. Gabriel tried not to think about how it would be to wake up there, with the morning light filtering through the lace curtains, with Emma sleeping beside him. "It's up there," she said, pointing to the top of the wardrobe. Gabriel easily reached the dark wooden box that was hidden behind some books. It was larger than he had expected, and heavy, with bronze hinges that had darkened with time. "Let's go downstairs," suggested Helen. "It will be more comfortable in the living room." On the table in the small dining room, Emma positioned the box with reverence as if it were a sacred relic. Gabriel sat beside her, Helen on the other side of the table. For a moment, no one moved. "Do you need a moment?" asked Gabriel. Emma shook her head, took a deep breath, and opened the box. The first item Gabriel saw was a black and white photograph of two young women. One of them was clearly Emma's mother, the other— "My God," whispered Helen. "It's Elizabeth." Gabriel carefully picked up the photograph. His aunt, whom he barely remembered, was arm in arm with a woman who was an older version of Emma. Both smiled at the camera, but there was something tense in their smiles, as if they knew they were doing something dangerous. "They knew each other," murmured Emma. "My mother knew your aunt." Helen took the photo, studying it carefully. "Look at the date on the back. March 1998, 2 months before Elizabeth disappeared." Gabriel felt a chill down his spine. They were investigating together. Emma continued removing items from the box. There were more photographs, documents in French with official seals, handwritten letters in an elegant calligraphy, and at the bottom, an object wrapped in black velvet. "What is this?" asked Gabriel when she hesitated to open the package. "I don't know. I never had the courage to see." Emma carefully unfolded the velvet, revealing a necklace identical to the one Sophie wore in the portrait at the mansion. The crimson. Eyes shone in the afternoon light like a drop of fresh blood. Helen extended her hand. "May I?" Emma handed over the necklace, and Helen held it up against the light. "It's old, 18th century, maybe 19th. The gold work is exceptional, and this stone—" She examined the crimson center more closely. "It's not a ruby, it's something else." "What else?" Gabriel picked up one of the letters, trying to decipher the French calligraphy. "I can't identify it, but there's something engraved on the back of the stone." Helen turned the necklace, showing small symbols engraved in the metal. "Coordinates, perhaps?" Gabriel studied the symbols, while Emma opened one of the letters. It was in English, in her mother's handwriting. "My dear Emma," she read aloud, her voice trembling, "if you are reading this, it's because something happened to me. There are truths about our family that I should have told you long ago, but I wanted to protect you, for as long as possible." Emma paused, wiping away a tear that ran down her face. Gabriel instinctively took her free hand, intertwining their fingers. "Continue," said Helen softly. "Our lineage is not just French, as I always said. We are descendants of the Guardians of the Crimson Eye, a society that existed for centuries, with a single purpose: to protect a secret that could change American history. Sophie Laurent, our ancestor, brought this secret from France when she married Baron Blackwood. She thought she would be safe here, but the other guardians followed her." Gabriel felt Helen stiffen beside him. "What secret?" Emma continued reading. "Documents that prove that the American Revolution didn't happen as we were taught. There was French gold financing the separation from England, but not just gold. There were also secret agreements that gave specific mineral rights to chosen families, including the Blackwoods. The wealth they built over the centuries didn't come just from luck or hard work. It came from privileges obtained through betrayal of the British Crown. The silence that followed was deafening. Gabriel looked at Helen, who was as pale as a ghost. "Mother," he said slowly, "is this true?" Helen didn't answer immediately. She studied the necklace with an intensity that bordered on obsession. "There were always stories," she said finally. "Rumors about how your great-grandfather got the first mining concessions, but I thought they were just stories." Emma continued reading the letter. The original Guardians split into two groups. Some, like Sophie, wanted to reveal the truth. Others wanted to protect it forever, even if it meant eliminating those who knew too much. Elizabeth Blackwood discovered this and sought me out. We thought together we would be stronger, but I was wrong. "Mother," whispered Emma, "if something happens to me, look for the documents where we always played when you were little. And trust only those who wear the sign. You'll know which one when you see it." The letter ended with a declaration of love and the signature of Charlotte Laurent Taylor. Gabriel looked around the small room, trying to process everything. His family, his empire, all the life he knew, built on a centuries-old lie. "Where did you play?" he asked. "There's a small attic," said Emma, pointing to the ceiling. "My mother always said it was our secret castle." Helen stood up abruptly. "We need to find these documents if they really exist, if they prove what your mother wrote. What would happen?" Gabriel stood up too, still holding Emma's hand. "It would mean that all the mining concessions obtained by our family would be questioned. The government could nullify contracts, confiscate properties." Helen paused, the reality hitting her completely. "We could lose everything." "Not just you," said Emma softly. "All the families involved. And if the documents prove betrayal to the British Crown, it would be an international scandal," finished Gabriel. "Britain could demand reparations. America could face a diplomatic crisis." Helen walked to the window, observing the quiet street outside. "Now I understand why Elizabeth and your mother disappeared, and why the other Guardians made sure that happened." "The other Guardians still exist?" asked Emma. "They must exist," said Helen. "Families like ours don't survive for centuries without protection. There must be people ensuring that the secrets remain buried." Gabriel felt a chill down his spine. "People like who?" Helen turned to him, her face grave. "Like Frank Coleman, for example." The name of the Attorney General fell like a bomb in the silence of the room. Gabriel felt the pieces fitting together in his mind like a macabre puzzle. "The marriage," he said slowly. "It's not just to stop the investigations. It's to keep me controlled." "And if you don't accept?" "Then they'll make sure I can't tell anyone." Gabriel looked at Emma, feeling the cold fear spreading through his veins. "And you too, Emma. You know too much now." Emma stood up, walking to the stairs. "I'll get the documents." "No," said Gabriel, holding her arm. "It's too dangerous." "Gabriel, if we don't discover the truth now, we'll never have the chance." She gently freed herself from his touch. "And I need to know what really happened to my mother." Before he could protest again, Emma was already climbing the narrow staircase. Gabriel followed her, ignoring Helen's warning look. The access to the attic was through a trapdoor in the ceiling of the room. Gabriel opened it, helping Emma climb up first. The space was small and stuffy, illuminated only by the light coming from the room below. "There," said Emma, pointing to a specific beam in the sloping ceiling. "That's where my mother used to hide our treasures when I was little." Gabriel felt along the beam until he found a small cavity disguised. His fingers touched paper, and he carefully removed a sealed envelope. "Got it?" "Yes." Gabriel descended first, extending his arms to help Emma. For a moment, she was suspended in his arms, their faces close enough that he could count each of her freckles. "Gabriel," she murmured. "I know." He placed her on the ground gently but didn't let go. "Emma, no matter what we discover, I won't let anything happen to you." "How can you be sure?" "Because—" Gabriel hesitated, then decided to be completely honest. "Because I've fallen in love with you." The words came out in a desperate confession, carrying all the tension and fear of the last 2 days. Emma looked at him with wide eyes, accelerated. Breathing. Gabriel, we barely know each other, or we know enough. He touched her face gently. I know that you are brave, intelligent, kind. I know that when you smile, the whole world gets brighter. I know that when I kissed you last night, I felt like I was finally home. Tears began to roll down Emma's face. But you're going to marry someone else. No, I'm not. Gabriel pulled her closer, his hands framing her face. Not if you tell me you feel the same. Gabriel, say it, he whispered. Please. Emma closed her eyes, a tear running down her cheek. I've fallen in love with you too, from the moment I saw you on the staircase. Gabriel couldn't contain himself. He leaned in and kissed her, a desperate kiss full of promises, as if he could seal their fate just with the touch of his lips. Emma responded with the same intensity, her hands tangling in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they separated, both were breathing heavily. Gabriel rested his forehead against hers, trying to memorize every detail of that moment. Whatever we discover, he said, we'll face it together. Together, she agreed. Helen's voice echoed from downstairs. Gabriel, Emma, did you find anything? Reluctantly, they separated. Gabriel picked up the envelope he had left on the bed, feeling its weight in his hands. Whatever was in there, it would change everything. In the living room, Helen was waiting with a tense expression. She immediately noticed their flushed faces and swollen lips, but didn't comment. Is that it? She asked, looking at the envelope. Gabriel nodded, handing it to her. Helen carefully opened it, removing several documents on paper yellowed by time. The first was a map of colonial America, with specific markings in the mineral regions. Montana, Colorado, Georgia, she murmured, tracing the markings with her finger. All the regions where our family has concessions. The second document made Helen turn completely pale. It was a letter, signed by a French official, and dated 1776. Read it, said Gabriel. Helen cleared her throat. I confirm receipt of the detailed maps of American gold mines, as agreed with the representatives of the Blackwood, Coleman, and Hayes families. In exchange for perpetual mineral rights, the aforementioned families provided crucial information about British defences and supply routes. The payment of 50,000 French pounds has been deposited as instructed. The silence was broken, only by the sound of the wall clock. Gabriel felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. 3 families, he said finally. Blackwood, Coleman, and Hayes. Hayes, repeated Emma. Isn't that your middle name? Gabriel nodded slowly. Gabriel Hayes Blackwood. Our family united with the 2 others through marriages over the centuries. To keep the secret in the family, said Helen, her voice empty of emotion. Gabriel picked up the third document, a more modern map with specific locations marked. These are all the properties where the original documents are hidden. There are copies buried in 15 different locations, including one here in Newport, noted Emma, pointing to a marking, in the old Hayes property. Helen stood up abruptly. We need to burn all of this, now. No, said Gabriel firmly. We're not burning anything. Gabriel, you don't understand the gravity. I understand perfectly. Gabriel positioned himself between Helen and the documents. I understand that our family built its fortune on betrayal and blood. I understand that we've lied to the entire country for 200 years. And I understand that it's time for the truth to come out. Helen looked at him as if he had lost his sanity. This would destroy not just our family, but hundreds of others. Thousands of people would lose their jobs, their homes. And millions of people would discover they've been deceived for centuries, retorted Gabriel. Mother, how many more people will disappear to keep this secret? How many families will be destroyed like Emma's? Helen looked at Emma, who was holding the photo of her mother with Elizabeth. I'm sorry for what happened to your mother and Elizabeth, she said, but exposing this won't bring them back. No, said Emma softly, but it can prevent other people from disappearing. Gabriel took Emma's hand, intertwining their fingers. Mother, I know this is difficult, but I can't live a lie, and I can't marry Isabella knowing her father is complicit in murders. "You're not sure they were murders," said Helen, but her voice sounded desperate. "Aren't I?" Gabriel approached his mother, holding her by the shoulders. "Mother, look into my eyes and tell me you don't know what happened to Aunt Elizabeth." Helen looked away, and Gabriel knew he had hit the mark. "You know," he said, his voice full of horror and disappointment. "You always knew." "Gabriel." "You knew and let me grow up believing she had simply run away." Gabriel moved away from his mother, pulling Emma with him. "How many other things have you hidden from me?" Helen turned to them, tears in her eyes. For the first time Gabriel could remember, "Everything I did was to protect you, to protect our family." "No," said Gabriel. "Everything you did was to protect a rotten secret that should have been exposed decades ago." Helen's phone rang, breaking the tension. She looked at the screen and turned even paler. "Frank Coleman," she said. "He must have discovered we're here." Gabriel picked up the documents from the table, putting them back in the envelope. "Then we'd better get out of here." "Where to?" asked Emma. Gabriel looked out the window. A black Mercedes had parked across the street, 2 men in dark suits getting out of the vehicle. "Anywhere," he said, taking Emma's hand. "Now." Helen hung up the phone without answering. "Gabriel, please think about what you're doing. If you flee with these documents, you'll be considered a criminal." "Then I'm already a criminal," said Gabriel, walking toward the back door, "because I'm not going to hand this over to be buried again." "Gabriel!" Helen's voice was a desperate cry. He stopped at the door, looking back one last time. "Mother, I love you, but I can't be like you. I can't live with blood on my hands, just to maintain an empire." "If you walk out that door," said Helen, tears now flowing freely, "there will be no coming back." Gabriel looked at Emma, who was holding his hand tightly, confidence and fear mixed in her eyes. Then he looked at the documents that could change American history. "I know," he said, and he walked out the back door, taking Emma with him, while Frank Coleman's men knocked on the front door. The escape had begun. The Lion of New York, Part. Gabriel pulled Emma through the backyard of the house, the envelope with the documents pressed against his chest. Behind them, they heard the sound of raised voices and heavy footsteps invading the small living room where Helen still was. Gabriel's heart hammered against his ribs as they ran between the fruit trees, looking for a way out. "This way," whispered Emma, guiding him along a narrow path that wound between neighboring houses. "I've known all the shortcuts since childhood." They emerged on a parallel street, where Gabriel had left the Porsche parked as a precaution. His hands trembled as he started the engine, the sound of the sports car cutting through the silence of the afternoon like a roar of warning. "Where are we going?" asked Emma, putting on her seatbelt, as Gabriel accelerated through the narrow streets of Newport. "Away from here. I need to think." Gabriel checked the rearview mirror, looking for signs of pursuit. "Emma, do you have somewhere we can stay? Somewhere they don't know about?" Emma thought for a moment, then her eyes lit up. "My cousin Julia has an inn in the Berkshires. It's small, discreet, she never asks too many questions." "How long to get there?" "An hour, maybe less the way you drive." Gabriel took the road leading to the mountains, the Porsche roaring as it climbed the winding curves. The sun was beginning to set, painting the mountains in golden and red tones that dramatically contrasted with the tension pulsing inside the car. "Gabriel," said Emma softly, "are you sure about what you're doing? If we hand over these documents, there's no going back. Your life, your family, everything will change." Gabriel slowed down, parking in a small rest area with a view of the valley. He turned off the engine and turned to her, taking her hands in his. "Emma, yesterday I was Gabriel Blackwood, heir to an empire built on lies. Today I discovered that my family is responsible for murders, that my wealth comes from betrayal, that my entire life was a farce." He caressed her face tenderly. "But I also discovered you, and for the first time in my life I know who I really want to be." "Who do you want to be?" "A man who deserves the love of a woman like you, a man who can look in the mirror without feeling disgust, a man my future children can admire without later discovering their father was a coward." Tears shimmered in Emma's eyes. "And if we lose everything, If we can't prove anything, if... Gabriel interrupted her with a gentle kiss, loaded with all the certainty he felt. When they separated, he rested his forehead against hers. Then at least we tried, and we'll be together. Together, she repeated, a small but determined smile appearing on her lips. Gabriel started the engine again, but before leaving, his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. "Hello? Gabriel Blackwood?" The voice on the other end was male, authoritative. "This is Frank Coleman." Gabriel signaled for Emma to be silent. "Attorney General Coleman, how can I help you? I think you know very well. Your mother told me about your adventure this afternoon. I need you to come back immediately with the documents you took." "What documents?" Frank laughed, a humorless sound. "Gabriel, don't underestimate me. I know exactly what you found in Miss Taylor's house. Documents that should have been destroyed decades ago." "Why weren't they?" "Because Charlotte Laurent and Elizabeth Blackwood were smarter than we thought. They hid copies everywhere, like a life insurance." Frank's voice turned icy. "An insurance that didn't work very well for them, it must be said." Gabriel felt his blood freeze. "You killed them. I protected the interests of 3 families and of millions of Americans who depend on the stability these families provide." Frank neither denied nor directly confirmed. "And now I need to protect those same interests from an idealistic young man who doesn't understand the consequences of his actions. The consequences of telling the truth? The consequences of destroying the country's economy, of causing an international diplomatic crisis, of putting tens of thousands of people out of work." Frank paused. "Gabriel, you have a choice. Come back with the documents, marry my daughter, as planned, and your little romantic adventure will be forgotten. Miss Taylor will receive generous compensation and can rebuild her life in another country. And if I refuse, then you will both have the same fate as your predecessors." The line went dead. Gabriel looked at Emma, who had heard the entire conversation. Their faces were pale but also determined. "He just confessed," said Emma, "admitted he killed my mother and your aunt. But only we heard it. We need proof." Gabriel held the steering wheel tightly. "And we need to get out of here now." They returned to the road, Gabriel driving faster than he should on the dangerous curves of the mountains. In the rearview mirror, he could see lights approaching, 2 dark cars rapidly gaining ground. "They found us," he said, stepping hard on the accelerator. The Porsche responded like a wild animal, roaring through the mountain curves as Gabriel used every ounce of his skill as a driver. Behind them, the 2 Mercedes tried to keep up, but the sports car was more agile in the tight curves. "There," shouted Emma, pointing to a secondary road almost hidden among the trees. "It's a shortcut to the inn." Gabriel turned sharply, the tires singing on the asphalt. The secondary road was narrow and poorly paved, but offered cover from the trees. In the rearview mirror, he saw one of the Mercedes try to make the same curve, and skid going off the road. "One down," he murmured. But the second car was still following them, and Gabriel could see they wouldn't be able to maintain the advantage for much longer. The road was getting narrower and narrower, and soon they would reach the point where they could no longer maneuver. "Emma, I need you to do something for me." "What?" Gabriel took the envelope with the documents and his cell phone. "Call every newspaper you can. New York Times, Washington Post, any of them. Say you have documents that prove corruption at the highest level of government." "Gabriel, what if they don't believe me?" "They'll believe when you mention the names Blackwood, Coleman, and Hayes together. These 3 families never appear publicly connected." Gabriel made a sharp turn, gaining a few precious seconds. "And if something happens to me..." "Nothing is going to happen. Emma, listen to me." Gabriel looked at her for a moment, recording every detail of her face in his memory. "If something happens, you take these documents and deliver them to the press. No matter what they offer, no matter how they try to intimidate you, the truth needs to be told." Tears were streaming down Emma's face. "I love you, Gabriel. I can't lose you too." "You won't lose me." Gabriel extended his hand, quickly touching her face. "I promise." Emma's cousin's inn appeared among the trees, a small rustic construction with welcoming lights in the windows. Gabriel parked behind the building, where the car couldn't be seen from the main road. "Julia!" Emma ran into the arms of a woman who looked like her a few years older, who had come out to see who had arrived. "Emma, what's happening? You look—" "Julia, I need help. We need help." Emma turned to Gabriel, who was approaching with the envelope. "This is Gabriel. We're running away." Julia looked between the two, noticing the desperation in their faces. "Come in, quickly." Inside the inn, which was empty of guests, Julia led them to a small office in the back. Gabriel immediately began making calls, while Emma quickly explained the situation to her cousin. "New York Times, I need to speak with the editor-in-chief. It's urgent." Gabriel waited a few seconds. "Yes, I know it's late, but I have documents that prove corruption involving the Attorney General and traditional American families." "Yes, I'll wait." While he spoke, Emma photographed each page of the documents with Julia's cell phone, creating digital copies that could be sent instantly. "Here," said Gabriel, passing the phone to Emma. "The editor wants to talk to you. He's going to record the conversation." Emma took a deep breath and began to tell the story: her mother's disappearance, the discovery of the documents, Frank Coleman's confession on the phone. Her voice was firm, clear, convincing. From outside, Gabriel heard the sound of cars approaching. He went to the window and saw lights cutting through the darkness of the mountain. "They're here," he said. Julia took a key from a hook on the wall. "There's a trail in the back that leads to a waterfall. Halfway there's a small cabin where tourists sometimes have picnics. You can hide there until dawn." "And you?" "I'll say I haven't seen anyone. That the inn is closed for renovation." Julia quickly hugged Emma. "Everything will be all right, cousin." Gabriel and Emma left through the back door, while loud knocks echoed at the main entrance. The trail was steep and dark, illuminated only by the full moon that had appeared between the clouds. They ran for 15 minutes, the sound of the waterfall getting stronger and stronger, until they reached the small wooden cabin Julia had mentioned. It was simple but clean, with some blankets and basic supplies. Gabriel locked the door and leaned against it, finally allowing exhaustion to hit him. Emma sat on one of the blankets, still holding the phone where she had recorded her interview. "Did you manage to send everything?" he asked. "Yes, the photos of the documents, the recording of the conversation, everything." Emma looked at him with a mixture of relief and fear. "The editor said he's going to publish a story tomorrow morning." Gabriel sat beside her, pulling her into his arms. "Then it's done. There's no going back." They remained silent for a moment, listening to the sound of water falling on the rocks. Emma nestled against Gabriel's chest, and he could feel her, heart beating against his. "Gabriel," she said softly, "what's going to happen now?" "I don't know." He kissed the top of her head. "I'll probably be arrested. My family will disinherit me. The Blackwood Empire will collapse." "Do you regret it?" Gabriel moved her slightly away to look into her eyes. "Finding you. Discovering the truth. Choosing to do what's right." He smiled, a true smile for the first time in days. "Never." Emma leaned in and kissed him, a gentle kiss that quickly deepened, carrying all the love and desperation they felt. Gabriel gently laid her down on the blankets, his hands tracing the delicate lines of her face, as if trying to memorize every detail. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "I love you too," she responded, her hands tangling in his hair. Under the silver light of the moon that filtered through the cracks of the cabin, they gave themselves to each other completely. It wasn't just desire, it was a deep connection, a silent promise that no matter what the future brought, they would face it together. Afterwards, lying embraced under the blankets, Gabriel heard Emma's phone ring. She answered carefully. "Hello?" Her voice was still hoarse with emotion. "Miss Taylor? This is Richard Sanders from the New York Times. Our story is on the website now. In 2 hours it will be on the front page of the print edition." Emma put the phone on speaker. "And the reactions?" "Explosive. The Justice Department denied everything, but other newspapers are already chasing the story. The Attorney General's office announced it will open an investigation, and—" Richard paused. "Frank Coleman just announced his resignation." Gabriel sat up abruptly. He resigned 10 minutes ago. Said he's going to dedicate himself to clearing his name of the unfounded accusations, but everyone knows it's because he doesn't want to face a formal investigation. Emma looked at Gabriel with hope shining in her eyes. And now? Now you need to turn yourselves into the authorities. The FBI wants statements from both of you. But, Richard hesitated, there are rumors that Helen Blackwood is cooperating. With the investigations, it seems she decided to tell everything she knows. Gabriel felt a complex wave of emotions, relief, sadness, hope. His mother had chosen the truth, even if too late. "Mr. Sanders," said Gabriel, "we're going to voluntarily present ourselves tomorrow morning, but I want guarantees of police protection. People have died to keep these secrets. It's already arranged. The FBI will pick you up wherever you are." After hanging up, Gabriel and Emma lay in silence, processing everything that had happened. Outside, the sound of the waterfall continued, constant and comforting. "Gabriel," said Emma finally, "what are we going to do afterwards, when all this is over?" Gabriel pulled her closer, feeling the softness of her skin against his. "We're going to build a new life, clean, honest." He kissed her forehead. "Maybe I won't have an empire to manage anymore, but I know other things. I can teach, consult, start from scratch if necessary." "And us?" "We're going to get married," he said, without hesitation. "If you want, of course. It will be in a simple church with few people, but it will be real, based on love, not on political convenience." Tears of happiness shimmered in Emma's eyes. "I want to, but what if your family doesn't accept it? What if we lose everything?" Gabriel leaned over her, looking deeply into her eyes. "Emma, I spent 35 years without you, living a life that wasn't mine, following a path I didn't choose. These last 3 days, knowing you, discovering who I really am, they were the only real days of my life." He caressed her face with infinite tenderness. "I'd rather have you and a cabin in the mountains than have an empire built on lies without you by my side." Gabriel. "Marry me, Emma. Not for convenience, not for business, not for family obligation. Marry me because you love me and because together we are stronger than alone." "Yes," she whispered, pulling him for a kiss. "Yes, I want to marry you." They made love again, this time with a different intensity. Not desperation, but celebration. The promise of a future built on truth and love. At dawn, Gabriel was awakened by the sound of helicopters. Emma woke up at the same time, and they quickly dressed, preparing to face the world outside. "Are you ready?" The voice came from a megaphone. "This is the FBI. Gabriel Blackwood and Emma Taylor, come out with your hands visible. We won't hurt you." Gabriel took Emma's hand, intertwining their fingers. "Ready?" "Ready." They opened the cabin door and stepped into the golden light of morning. An FBI team was waiting for them, but not aggressively. Protection as promised. Gabriel. "Blackwood?" asked the officer in charge. "Yes, that's me, and this is Emma Taylor. We need you to come with us to give statements. You are under federal protection until all investigations are concluded." As they walked toward the official cars, Gabriel looked back at the small cabin where they had spent the night. There, in the mountains of Massachusetts, far from the world, of power and privilege where he had grown up, he had found something he never knew he was looking for: himself. 6 months later, Gabriel was on the balcony of the small apartment he shared with Emma in Brooklyn, New York, watching the illuminated skyline against the starry sky. His hands were no longer those of a spoiled executive. They were calloused from work as a consultant for small businesses, helping honest entrepreneurs build sustainable businesses. "What are you thinking about?" Emma appeared behind him, wrapping her arms around him from behind. "About how life can change completely in such a short time." Gabriel turned in her arms, admiring the simple gold ring she wore on her ring finger. They had gotten married 2 weeks before, in a small but perfect ceremony in a local church. "Do you regret it?" she asked, playing with the same type of ring he wore. "Regret what?" "Losing an empire built on blood. Having a wife who loves me for who I am, not for what I own. Being able to sleep at night without nightmares." Gabriel kissed her softly. "Never." And your mother. Gabriel sighed. Helen had kept her promise to collaborate with the investigations, but the price was high. Blackwood Mining was in the process of judicial liquidation, its assets being used to compensate communities affected by predatory mining over the centuries. Helen was under house arrest, awaiting trial. She is paying for what she did, but she's also free for the first time in her life. She told me on the last visit that she can finally sleep without fear. Gabriel held Emma against him. And she loves you, you know. She said I chose well, even after everything that happened. Especially after everything that happened. She saw what kind of man I became by your side. Gabriel smiled. And she wants to meet the grandchildren as soon as possible. Emma blushed, instinctively placing her hand over her still flat belly. They hadn't told anyone about the pregnancy yet. It was too early, just 6 weeks. But Gabriel had never felt so complete, so full of hope for the future. How do you think we'll explain to our children where the money for their education comes from? Asked Emma, referring to the fund they had created with the little Gabriel, had managed to save before the company's liquidation. We'll tell the truth, always the truth. Gabriel kissed her forehead. That sometimes people make wrong choices, but there's always time to make the right ones. That love is stronger than power. That honesty is worth more than all the gold in the world. From their apartment, they could see the city lights spreading to the ocean. New York, with all its beauty and contradictions, had become their new home. Gabriel taught business administration at a public university 3 times a week. Emma had opened a small art restoration studio. Life was simple, but it was real. Gabriel, said Emma softly, thank you. For what? For choosing love, for choosing truth, for choosing me. Gabriel held her tighter, looking at the stars that shone over the magnificent city. Somewhere in those stars, he liked to think, Charlotte and Elizabeth finally rested in peace, knowing that the truth had prevailed. I'm the one who should thank you, he murmured, for teaching me that a man is not defined by his inheritance, but by his choices, for showing me that true love is worth any sacrifice. They stood, there embraced on the balcony, while the city vibrated around them. Gabriel Blackwood had lost an empire but gained a kingdom, the heart of the woman he loved, the peace of mind that comes from truth, and the promise of a future built on solid foundations of honesty and love. And in the distance, the statue of Liberty stood with open arms, blessing all those who had found the courage to start over. The Lion of New York had become a man of Brooklyn, and he had never roared so loudly with happiness.